Unit 5. The Science of Life. Exercise 3B, page 99.
In my career as a doctor spanning almost 30 years, I've witnessed many changes in the diagnosis and treatment of disease. As a GP, I come up against everything from ingrowing toenails to cancer, and it never ceases to amaze me how much ill health there is around. Speaking of cancer, nowadays we can cure about 1 in 3 malignant cancers outright, and in addition to this, there are many other cases where we achieve what is referred to as a 5-year cure. It's never easy to predict the future, but I'd say that given the breakthroughs now taking place in the realm of genetic engineering, we could well see a 100% cure and/or prevention rate within the next 30 years. Infectious diseases spread by vectors such as mosquitoes are still a major source of ill health in many parts of the world. Most governments have measures in place designed to limit and eventually wipe out these vectors, and the malaria and sandfly fever along with them. Within our lifetime, we should have seen the last of them. That's hopefully in about 25 years in my case. While I'm on the subject of longevity, the average life expectancy for someone who today is in their youth, provided they take care of their health, is around 82. With any luck, by the time their grandchildren are pensioners, that figure may have reached the magic 100. That's about 100 years. In 1982, the world was hit by what was dubbed the last great scourge of the 20th century, AIDS. Scientists around the world are working feverishly in an all-out effort to find a vaccine that will either cure people who have the virus that causes AIDS or provide immunity from it. At the rate things are advancing, we can expect to see a vaccine by the end of the decade. The aptly named common cold is one of the earliest recorded diseases and is mentioned by Hippocrates. Because the virus causing the illness keeps mutating, the cure for the common cold remains elusive. I'd hazard a guess at half a century if you were to ask me how long before a cure is discovered, but don't hold your breath. Now, I have many patients who come to see me with one thing or another wrong with their heart. The prospect of having to have heart surgery frightens the life out of many people, but often they are amazed to hear that their operation involves no incisions, no pain, and no blood. This is because an increasing number of procedures are carried out using minute probes, which are inserted into blood vessels in the top of the leg and manipulated towards the heart by the surgeon. I wouldn't be at all surprised if at least 80% of heart surgery were to be performed in this way within the next 5 years.
Exercise 3C, page 99.
The medical advances I've mentioned so far are all directly or indirectly dependent on research involving the use of animals. Speaking as a scientist and a doctor, I have seen with my own eyes the enormous benefits to people such research can bring. If there were another way of achieving the same gains without the use of animal trials, believe me, I'd be wholeheartedly in favour of it. Unfortunately, for the time being at least, no such alternative exists. People who vandalise research establishments, so-called animal rights activists, succeed only in slowing up progress in achieving the results we're after. The only other thing they achieve is to attract media attention. The media, in turn, take the opportunity of creating a human interest story out of the issue. Conversely, when a medical breakthrough, such as a new development in transplant surgery, is announced, it gets a passing mention on page 4 in one column near the bottom. One can only assume that this reflects the general public's lack of enthusiasm for news of such importance to them. I'll never understand this. Of course, apathy is also a trait of governments when it comes to reacting to demands for better state health provision. They tend to meet demands for increased funding with calls for belt tightening. They're telling us that we must break out of the nanny state mentality has also become commonplace.
Exercise 19A, page 105. 1.
5 o'clock is a bit late. Have you got anything earlier?
Let's see. I can give you an appointment at 4:15. How does that suit you?
2.
Graham, hi, Linda here. Listen, about meeting you tomorrow, something's come up. I'm afraid I can't make it.
Oh, that's a shame. Well, maybe next week then.
I'll try.
OK, Linda, never mind then. Thanks for letting me know.
3.
Is there an earlier appointment?
Well, I can fit you in at 11:30. How's that?
4.
So, has he got any free time today?
I'm afraid he's booked solid today, Miss Clarkson.
5.
Hello. I would like to make an appointment to see the manager, please.
Certainly. May I ask what this is in reference to?
6.
Good morning. My name is John Bart, and I have an appointment with Dr. Robson.
Certainly. Why don't you have a seat, and I'll let him know you're here.
7.
Brian, hi, it's Patricia.
Hi there.
Listen, I'm stuck in terrible traffic, so I'm running late. Can we move the appointment to sometime tomorrow?
Exercise 23A, page 107.
What on earth is that?
It's my biology project. I've got to monitor the growth of cultures of microorganisms over the weekend. It's what you might call a cultural weekend.
Very funny. I hope that stuff isn't dangerous. You can't be too careful, you know. Anyway, just how are you supposed to monitor the growth of microorganisms without a high-powered microscope?
Voila! The last word in optical microscopes, complete with student-friendly carrying case. It's got a magnifying power of 5,000.
I say. That's very trusting of the school to let you take the microscope home for the weekend.
Dad, it's not the microscope, it's my microscope. We're all issued with one at the beginning of the school year. Of course, we're expected to look after it until the time comes to hand it in. It wouldn't be possible to do weekend projects if we didn't have the equipment now, would it?
Suppose not. Things have progressed somewhat since my school days, that's for sure. We used to have the books provided and sometimes the odd musical instrument, but we usually had to share it with somebody else. You don't realize how lucky you are.
Lucky? What are you talking about? Measuring the growth rate of microbes all weekend isn't exactly what I'd call lucky.
I give up.
Exercise 24A, page 107.
If there's one thing that sticks out in my mind from my childhood, it's all the time I had off from school because of my ears. I had some kind of recurring ear problem that I was always being dragged off to the doctors for, and I was excused from swimming on more occasions than I care to remember. As I remember, there were always a lot of children off school. Somebody was always coming down with something or other. In my job as a teacher, I've gradually seen the amount of absenteeism due to illness decline over the time I've been in the profession. Some of my colleagues took the time to look into whether the apparent decline in childhood illness could be put down to the general improvement in the nation's health, or whether there are other factors at play. Of course, it's very difficult to separate all the variables, but one possibility is the level of childhood illness has in fact remained static, and that the decline in school absenteeism is explained by the fact that because there are more and more families where both partners are in full-time employment, there's simply no one at home during the day to take care of a sick child in any case. If this is indeed the case, the implication is that we have sick children in the classroom who, firstly, can't concentrate fully on the lesson, and secondly, in all probability, are bringing the rest of the class down with whatever it is they have. This is a wonderful example of how what appears on the surface to be an improvement is in fact a worsening situation when looked at in more detail.
Sample interview. Exercise 25. A, B, C. Page 107.
Now I'd like you to talk about something together. Here are some pictures on the theme of health. First of all, please look at pictures A and B and talk together about which picture you think sends out the stronger message. I'd like you to talk for about a minute on this, so if I stop you, please don't worry.
Well, let's start with picture A, shall we? A photograph of a skull with a lit cigarette hanging out of its mouth. Horrific, really, isn't it?
Yes, it's obviously designed to shock. The fact that the skull has been stained a tobacco brown makes it even worse. The other one is less obvious. What do you think it is?
Yes, it's been puzzling me a bit too. I think, though, that it must be something medical. Perhaps 2 X-rays showing the effects of smoking on the lungs. You know, how tar clogs up the lungs.
Ah, yes, I see what you mean. Which one do you think has the stronger message? I think I'd go for picture A. I mean, everyone knows that smoking is bad for you, but they don't like to face up to the fact that it can kill you.
Yes, picture B just shows a condition without any comment. No indication of how bad it is, or whether it's a reversible or incurable condition. While A really makes you sit up and take notice. I'd go along with you there, I think.
Thank you. Now I'd like you to look at all the pictures. Imagine that 2 of these will be selected to go on the front page of a government publication entitled Smoking Kills. Together, decide on the 2 pictures you would use. Say whether pictures you have not chosen do not do the job as well, and then suggest one other photograph that you would like to see on the cover. Please talk about this for about 3 minutes.
Right. Now, pictures to go on the front of a government anti-smoking publication. I suppose we should start by thinking about who the publication is directed at. That will help us choose the pictures.
Well, I'd say that it should probably be directed at young people and sent round to schools. After all, they're the people the tobacco companies are targeting in their advertising campaigns. So they're the people at risk.
In that case, I think we should discard picture B. I don't think it's the kind of picture to make much of an impression on young people. It's too scientific, and as we said before, it doesn't make the point very strongly.
Yes, but remember, it is a government publication. They tend to avoid sensationalism, so perhaps in this case it would be better to have the X-rays on the cover rather than the skull.
I'm not so sure about that, but if we do choose the X-rays, then I think the other picture we choose has to be more descriptive. I tend to prefer picture D to picture C.
Picture C is quite dramatic, but it could be any medical emergency. It doesn't necessarily indicate smoking. As well as that, it shows someone being rushed into hospital from an ambulance. And if you are taken to hospital, the implication is that you're going to recover. So the message smoking kills isn't put across very effectively here.
No, it isn't, which is why I prefer picture D. It shows a young woman in a haze of smoke, but it's not a glamorous image, as cigarette advertisements tend to be. She looks as if she can't breathe and is choking on the smoke. She's definitely suffering from that cigarette. Actually, I'd like to go back to what I suggested before. Despite it being a government publication, there should be a strong message conveyed. Pictures A and D really underline the title. I think I'd say they're dramatic rather than anything else.
OK, point taken. Particularly since we've decided that the publication is directed at young people, so we need something that attracts attention and relates to them in a way. Like the picture of the young woman. So, we've chosen A and D.
Yes, that's right. Now another photograph. It might be a good idea to include a photograph showing the effects of passive smoking. What do you think?
Yes, people are inclined to feel that it is only the smoker, him or herself, that is at risk, when in fact it is everybody in the immediate vicinity as well. Young children are particularly vulnerable.
So we could include a picture of a family at home, the parents both smoking, and their children sitting in a smoke-filled environment. Something like a mother feeding her baby while she's smoking.
or a pregnant woman smoking. According to statistics, children born to women who smoked during pregnancy are likely to be underweight and to be far more susceptible to chest ailments.
Yes, both of those would be good. Which one should we choose?
I think the picture of the family would probably be the best. That moves the whole question away from just the individual and makes us think of the bad effects on society, especially on those closest to us.
Thank you.
How about including a picture of a pregnant woman smoking? There's a poster like that. It's one that's often displayed in hospitals and clinics to put across the message that smoking can harm the unborn child. If one of these were to be included, it would broaden the scope of the leaflet.
Yes, I had seen that image, but wouldn't you to say it's a bit overused? It is no doubt it delivered its message too effectively in the past, but overexposure to an image desensitizes the people for whose it is intended, and I doubt if it would have had the same impact today that it had previously.
Well, all right, but while pictures A to D all show how smoking can affect the individual, they don't show how smoking can be a danger to non-smokers, which is something which needs to be pointed out in this kind of publication. After all, a smoker makes his own choices, but those around him are the ones whose health will also be affected.
You're meaning passive smoking. That's a so valid point. Passive smoking isn't represented among the pictures, yet it's certainly a controversial issue in today's society. Perhaps the image you mentioned of the pregnant woman could be altered. She and her baby could depict the victims to passive smoking. Rather her, the smoker could be her husband.
Yes, that would be much more effective.
Unit 6. The Art of Entertainment. Exercise 4. Page 119.
I think I'd say that I always keep my audience in mind. It's important not to underestimate them, but you shouldn't overestimate them either. I mean, we're not making a picture for university professors. We're making it for ordinary people, the people we pass in the street every day. What I really want to say, I suppose, is that we shouldn't bore them or give them subjects too far from their own interests.
I've got a rather different point of view, I think. To be honest, I'd rather do what I want to do and what's interesting for me, something that breaks new ground, than make a film just because it's commercial and will go down well in Hollywood. The result may not have crowd appeal, but it makes a contribution to the development of film as an art form. In fact, I always make low-cost movies. If you're on a small budget, you're not answerable to anyone else and you can do what you like.
But who's going to go and see them? There has to be an audience, and that audience must be made to laugh or to cry, enjoy themselves, to feel that the money they handed over for the ticket was worth it.
Entertainment takes different forms though, doesn't it? You can be just as entertained by seeing something a bit different and which makes you think as you can by laughing your head off at a comedy. They're just different aspects of the same thing.
Exercise 14B, page 122.
Personally speaking, I'm a member of the school of thought that insists on inwardly comprehending art before it's possible to truly appreciate what the artist intended to convey when painting it. It is also important to bear in mind something of the background of the individual. This is never truer than in the works of John Singer Sargent and René Magritte. Magritte's The Lovers Too is a fine example of the often challenging images that stem from his revelations of the mystery of the visible world. To him, this world was a more than adequate source of lucid revelations, so that he didn't need to draw on dreams like other surrealists. He remains one of the art world's most obscure figures, but those who find him obscure shouldn't forget that he had turned his back on the fantastic and on the immediate world of dreams. He didn't seek to be obscure. There are many who fail to see what it is about this particular piece that made it so well known. John Singer Sargent's famous painting, Carnation, Lily, Lily, Rose, is in complete contrast to The Lovers Too, in that it has a light and innocent quality which gives those unversed in his work, the impression that he was shallow and lacked the philosophical depth of the surrealists. Sargent, however, predated the surrealists, and closer examination of his work reveals elements of movement, which helped define the surrealist school of painting.
Exercise 28B, page 126.
Today, we continue with the next segment in our series on famous entertainment spots. This afternoon, we're travelling to America, to sunny California, in fact, to talk about Grauman's Chinese theatre. We're lucky to have in the studio Jill James, manager of this illustrious theatre. Thanks for coming, Jill. Why don't we begin with a bit of historical background on the theatre?
That's as good a starting place as any. Well, Grauman's Chinese theatre was opened over 70 years ago by legendary showman Sid Grauman, the man who also built the nearby Egyptian Theatre and the $1 Million Theatre on Broadway. The theatre was renamed Mann's Chinese Theatre after it was purchased by Ted Mann in 1973. But by any name, it's still the same grand landmark. The Chinese theatre has been the site of more gala Hollywood movie premieres than any other theatre in the world. In 1939, for instance, over 10,000 spectators showed up for the world premiere of The Wizard of Oz. And back in the 1940s, Grauman's Chinese Theatre hosted the annual Academy Award ceremonies.
Why is it called the Chinese Theatre?
That's because of its architectural design. Sid Grauman had a flair for the dramatic, and he was the one who came up with the idea for the unique Oriental theme. The ornate exterior of the theatre is almost as enticing as its celebrated forecourt, which we'll talk about in a bit. Resembling a giant red Chinese pagoda, the theatre's architecture features a huge dragon snaking its way across the front, 2 stone lion dogs guarding the main entrance, and the silhouettes of tiny dragons racing up and down the sides of the theatre's decorative copper roof.
Sounds wonderful. What could we expect to see inside the theatre?
As a matter of fact, you'd be in for quite a surprise. You might suspect that after 7 decades, the theatre's interior would be dilapidated, like many of the other older theatres in LA. But in fact, the Chinese theatre remains in surprisingly good condition. Its interior decor is a dazzling blur of exotic Asian motifs, and the lobby boasts elaborate wall murals depicting life in the Orient, and a colossal, intricate Chinese chandelier. In the lobby's west wing is a glass case containing 3 wax figures wearing authentic Chinese costumes. Movie makers used to consider it good luck to come to the theatre and touch these wax figures before embarking on a new film project.
You were going to tell us a bit about the forecourt.
That's right. This renowned forecourt represents a virtual who's who of Hollywood greats, with its extensive display of footprints, handprints, and autographs immortalized in the legendary cement. There have only been about 173 star prints made so far, and the remaining empty space in the courtyard is scarce. So the honour is now reserved solely for true Hollywood superstars.
Gosh, we're nearly out of time already. Any last words for our audience, Jill?
Yes, actually a bit of advice for those who visit the theatre in person. Near the forecourt you'll find that the tourist business, with all its inherent evils, is thriving. Beware of the booth set up hawking various guided bus tours of Hollywood and the movie stars' homes. More often than not, the tours are incredibly high-priced and not worth half of what the guides are charging. Also, even though the outdoor courtyard is open 24 hours a day, be warned. Hollywood Boulevard can be a rough place at times, especially in the late hours. Use common sense, stick with the group, and come at a sensible hour.
I'll certainly bear that in mind.
Jack was a good friend and an outstanding artist, and I can still remember him almost 45 years on. We were in the same year group together at the Art Students League in New York. He was starting to be influenced by the Mexican muralist painters, and a little while later by certain aspects of surrealism. By the mid-1940s, he started to paint in a completely abstract manner, and it was around that time that he developed his drip and splash style that he became renowned for. He would put his canvas on the floor and pour his paint from a can. Instead of using brushes, he manipulated the paint with knives and trowels, and anything else that came to hand. This action painting was supposed to result in a direct expression of the unconscious moods of the artist, and he became its best-known practitioner. As I recall, it was around this time that his name became associated with the introduction of the all-over style. This avoids any points of emphasis or identifiable parts within the whole canvas, and therefore abandons the traditional idea of composition in terms of relations among the parts of a painting. One thing that perhaps not many people know is that the design of his paintings had no relationship to the size or shape of the canvas, and this was often cropped to suit the image subsequent to the work being painted. Neat trick, I always thought.
There's actually quite a funny story behind this song. This was written especially for a performance I was doing last summer down in Cornwall. Sarah Dunnage was supposed to be coming to the gig and singing a couple of songs with me, but I gave her the wrong date, you see. People that know me are not surprised when I tell them this. Anyway, I'm talking to Sarah on the phone 3 days before the gig, and at some point I said something to the effect of, "I'll see you in 3 days." So there's this long pause, and then she says, "You mean next week?" And I say, "No, I mean this week." Anyway, that's how the mix-up came to light. She says, "Well, I'm sorry, Bob, I'm playing in London on Wednesday." So, resourceful guy that I am, I had this great idea where we would hook up during the concert through the telephone lines, and we would do a song together, which would be heard at the same time in Cornwall and London. And Sarah loved the idea, and so we started talking about which song to do, and at some point I suggested that I should write a song for the occasion and call it Long Distance, which I actually sat down and did that very evening. The next thing I did was I got my brother, who's a bit of a computer freak, to record the song and encode it into MP3 on his computer, and I emailed it to Sarah, and so she was able to rehearse and become familiar with it. So on the day of the actual concert, the guys from BT came along, and they were extremely helpful, and I was talking to Sarah and hearing her from the speakers in no time. And when it finally came to playing the song live, well, the audience absolutely adored it in Cornwall, and Sarah tells me that it was extremely well received in London too. And there you have it. Who said rock and roll can't be high-tech?
Isn't it wonderful the way we have music in the streets now? You're sitting at home and you can hear old songs drifting up from the street below and see people leaning over their balconies to listen.
Well, yes, it is if you look at it like that. I can't help thinking about the musicians. The reason they're doing it is obviously because they're desperate and they've no other means of making money. I don't know how many streets they have to walk through or how long they have to go on for. And here we sit in our nice, comfortable houses. The other night I was at the cinema, The Late Show, and when we came out, there were people busking in the foyer, all trying to look as happy as possible, but no one was giving them anything. People just put their heads down and scurried off.
Well, maybe. But I'd say that on the whole, they make quite a lot of money. Look how many buskers there are in the main shopping streets.
True, but...
In this part of the test, I'd like you each to talk on your own for about 2 minutes. You should listen to what your partner says, because I'll ask you to comment afterwards. Pierre, I'm going to show you a card. There is a question written on the card, and I'd like you to give us your opinion. There are some ideas on the card, and you can use them if you want to. So here is your card, Pierre. Please let Joanna see your card. Don't forget, Pierre, you have about 2 minutes to talk before we join in. Would you like to start?
As far as I am concerned, art is all around us all the time. Everywhere we go, we hear music blasting out of car stereos, radios and sound systems. Sometimes this can be irritating. For example, when we are in a cafe trying to have a quiet chat over a coffee with a friend, and the music is so loud that we cannot hear what the other is saying, we often feel stressed. At other times, however, music can provide a soundtrack to our lives and contribute to our memories of certain events or occasions. For instance, We may associate an event in our lives with a song that was playing at the time, and every time we hear that song in the future, it will evoke the feelings we had at the time we first heard it. The music we hear as we go about our daily business can also affect our mood and make us feel happy, sad, or energetic, depending on the rhythm and tune of what we hear. I always listen to the radio when I am getting ready for work in the mornings, and the songs I hear influence my mood for the rest of the day, especially as I tend to get songs stuck in my head and hear them over and over again in my mind. And then there are books, which we use all the time. I think that reading can be very relaxing, especially after a stressful day at work or school. When you immerse yourself in a novel, you escape your daily routine and enter another world, encountering fantastic characters and locations. The same applies to films. Everyone now can watch any kind of film at the cinema or on a video at home. Although, when watching a movie, you do not have to use as much imagination as you do when reading. The stories told in books take place in your mind, whereas stories told in films are the product of someone else's imagination. When watching a film, we are completely passive. I think that is why many people find watching films more relaxing than reading. They don't have to make any effort and can just lose themselves in the plot and imagery. In my opinion, it is wonderful to have so much access to art in our daily lives. Music, books, and films can relax us and help to bring colour to our lives.
Thank you. Joanna, generally speaking, do you think art is present in our everyday lives?
Well, I agree with what Pierre says about being constantly surrounded by music and having plenty of access to books and films. But I don't think that any of these necessarily fall into the category of art. I think that if we are going to describe something as art, then there has to be some sort of criterion of quality involved, and not many of the books and films, or much of the music for that matter, which we are exposed to, would accord with that.
Now, Joanna, I'm going to give you your question. So here is your card. Please let Pierre see your card. Don't forget, Joanna, that you have about 2 minutes to give us your opinion. There are some ideas on the card and you can use them if you want to. Right, would you like to begin now?
Art can play a great role in helping children to develop their personalities. When children become involved in an artistic project, they learn how to express their inner feelings through different mediums. By painting or drawing, they can show their moods and thoughts. This can give them a sense of freedom and can also help others to understand their frame of mind. There are plenty of child psychologists, for example, who ask children to draw or paint an episode or person in their lives in order to get an idea of what is on the child's mind. Sometimes the child may not even be aware that they are trying to express anything, but art nevertheless provides an outlet for their feelings, unconscious or otherwise. Children can also experience a sense of achievement when they take part in an artistic activity. They feel proud of the things they create, particularly when their handiwork is displayed in a prominent place by their parents or teacher. This can help to build their self-confidence and help them to overcome shyness as they feel that others appreciate their creations. Another important way in which art can aid children's personal development is by teaching them to be creative. Having the freedom to paint or draw whatever they like gives children the opportunity to use their imagination and come up with original ideas. Through being able to choose their own colours, shapes and styles, they learn different ways of creating pictures and patterns, and learn new artistic skills. Personally, I think that it is essential for every child to be involved in art in order to acquire creative skills, greater self-confidence, and self-awareness. All children should experience the feeling of possibilities which a blank sheet of paper and a box of colours can offer, and not only develop their personalities, but open up a whole new area of satisfaction and fulfillment. It's something like being able to play a musical instrument. It provides the child with a great source of enjoyment.
Thank you. Pierre, to what extent do you think being involved in art can help a child develop their personality?
I feel that art is very valuable to children. But I think it's a mistake to think that it's only small children who are going to derive any benefit from painting and drawing. After all, older children and adults have the same need to express themselves, and it is still easier for many to do that in the more concrete form of a painting. I would say that schools should regard art teaching as just as important as any other subject in the school curriculum.
Now, to finish off, we're going to talk about the arts in general. Do some artists earn too much money?
Well, certainly, some artists earn a lot of money, but whether it's too much money depends on your opinion of their work. It's difficult to be objective about it, particularly if you're talking about something like abstract art, which arouses greatly diverging feelings. Some people think it is brilliant, others think they could do just as well themselves, and it's worth nothing. Then again, people we now consider some of the greatest artists of the modern world, like Picasso for example, could hardly give away their paintings when they began, but later could almost ask any price they wanted. So if they ended up earning a lot, well, perhaps that was compensation for the years with nothing.
It also depends how you view art, doesn't it? If you consider the acquisition of works of art to be an investment, as many people do, then in a sense it suits you that artists should be able to ask high prices, because it means your investment retains its value. But if you consider painting or sculpting to be a kind of higher vocation, which should never be associated with money, then of course you think that artists are belittling themselves by asking for a lot of money. You feel that they are giving in to commercial pressures.
It's just a matter of market forces. There's no moral question.
How can governments encourage people to enjoy art?
Well, I'm not sure how much it has to do with governments. It's got more to do with schools, really, and educating children to appreciate and enjoy art, and the arts in general. I suppose where governments come in is in setting up the initiatives. I mean, they are the ones who direct school policy in the first place, so they could make sure that all schools go on theatre visits or to galleries, and that, as we've said before, art is taught, or there are pottery classes or photography classes or whatever. Perhaps it's not enough to leave it up to individual schools, but to put the schools under an obligation to promote the arts of all kinds.
Yes, the government's role is in providing funding. But I think we have to look beyond schools, although they are important, to a whole range of things like providing the means to set up museums, galleries, theatres and so on in the first place, and then to subsidise events. Governments need to establish a grant system whereby performers or organisations can apply for financial help. Then they have to have a policy of making all these events and organisations accessible to the general public, which means putting on productions and shows that people will enjoy, as well as sponsoring arts festivals of various kinds.
And to go back to schools, one of the things that governments could sponsor would be theatre companies touring schools and putting on productions for the children or art competitions for school children.
Thank you. That is the end of the test.
How important is art in your community?
Well, I come from a big town which prides itself on the contribution it makes to art and the arts. There is a very lively art scene with a number of different things going on. Then, every summer, we have an important music festival to which people from all over the world come. What makes it particularly interesting is that it doesn't just feature international music, but, owing to our area being one of the richest sources of folk music in the country, it also has a strong local element. It could be said that none of these reflect the interest of the inhabitants, of course. Yet, in fact, the majority of people in my city, whether they have an artistic background or not, are involved in the arts in some way or another. People are always putting on their own productions or forming clubs to promote some aspect of the arts, for example. And events are always full. Bookings have to be made well in advance. I don't think I could imagine living in a place without this sort of artistic life.
Try my town. I'm the opposite. I come from a small town. It's a village, really. The arts do not play a significant role because people in the village are extremely busy. They have to work in the fields and maintain their farms. There is little time for the theatre or the cinema and galleries. I imagine we could call the agricultural festivals a kind of interest in the arts. Every year there is a 2 or 3 day festival when the whole village celebrates and people take time off. This celebration usually consists of inviting a well-known performer to come and sing. The audience sing and dance until the early hours of the morning. It's great fun, but not really artistic. Your town is much more impressive in that respect. I know that other places in the area have developed more of an interest in the performing arts or in painting, but not in my village. TV takes priority.
But were someone to initiate some other events, I'm sure people would be interested.